I know it's taken you 4 years to, write and publish this book. So kind of tell us what inspired you to write it.
Oh, Maggie, that's a story in itself. It was 2 days after Trump's election as president, and I was in a state of shock. I had already planned a medicine trip with psychedelic mushrooms. And so I went not knowing what was going to happen to me because of the time. And as I adjusted to the medicine with a few other people in the room, I was anxious at first, and then I rolled over and relaxed, and I went into this incredible persona of Earth Goddess, or Gaia, or Earth Spirit, whatever you want to call it. And I felt this enormous power and authority, and I just thought, we cannot be defeated. This will not stand. And I just lay in that state for like 3 hours of complete freedom and independence from everything. And I thought myself as a spider and an ant and all other things. And so I'd never had an experience like that before or since. And when I came down from it, I thought, well, I think I probably need to write about my life in the search for gender equality. So that's what started me off.
Powerful. Well, I mean, yeah, it sounds like a lot happened there, but it seemed like Trump's election to presidency seemed like a large part of that catalyst. So obviously, what part of it, and here we are again, what part of the election was it that worried you the most?
It seemed like a retrenchment of the government into a state of male dominance. I thought we had moved out of that in the past 50 years. And yeah, let's not have this in front of our face yet. Lucian, can you take him away? Yeah, thanks. I had studied this system when I was in anthropology, and I knew that it was very aggressive. Okay, now show us the baboon, yeah. And also very anti-female. This is one of the states, one of the photos that we were familiar with in the 1970s, often identified as Man the Hunter. I mean, not quite this bad, but they were baboons that were very aggressive. And this is a Hamadryas baboon of Egypt. I knew it was a bad system, and I was afraid of what it was going to do to us. Patriarchy, as we know it, came along later in the Mesopotamian period. It's a more civilized, advanced system of male dominance, but it's the same, similar. Xenophobic, toxic masculinity, fighting, and gender inequality. So you can show us the next one, Lucian. This is King Sargon of Akkad, who lived 2500 BC. He was the first imperialist. And I don't know why one eye is shot out, but this picture kind of strikes me that way. He invaded every known part of the world at that time, and he was the first imperialist, and he took over everything. It was the beginning of 5,000 years of rather constant fighting and warfare in many parts of the civilized world. Okay, we could go on from this.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, it's you talk about all that, but you also kind of put it in this memoir format. So what kind of, structurally, why write this as a memoir?
Because all stories of our human past are written from a subjective point of view. All the narratives are subjective, and they're told from the background of authors and writers and archaeologists and anthropologists who have gender and age and background in their stories, but they just don't admit it. They're written as science, but they're not. They're subjective narratives. And they're based on evidence. I don't mean to say they're wrong, but they are subjective and often not exposed that way. So I wanted to show in a very direct form that this is one version of reality. It's based on evidence. I found the evidence for it. You can trust it, but it's not the whole truth. It's one truth. And the same way that male dominant, male biased narratives are biased, and they have really cut women out of most of the stories. Yeah. So then we.
You talk a lot about your family. Your kind
my
of
family, my sisters were, especially my younger sister. Next. Yeah. This was the traumatic experience of my life. Barbara died of an unknown disease when she was 10 and I was 12. I never recovered from that. It shaped the rest of my life. It destroyed my family because it was just, we didn't know how to deal with death in the family. And it set me off on an existential quest for the rest of my life. And that influenced what I did with my life. And in the next photo, you see my older sister, also very influential. She was a painter. She is a painter, and she did the cover on my book, which I think is just marvelous that at the end of our life, we've come together. Our arts have come together. She was a drama queen in my family. And then the last one is me playing with my toes. I don't know what age I was here. But my family was all female except for my father. And I always sort of felt sorry for him because we had a very strong mother and he didn't seem to match her in power and authority. And that I always felt bad about that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, so yeah, you're kind of like, your book explores life before patriarchy, which, is kind of challenging for us to imagine today. So, but you're kind of saying in your family structure, you have this kind of female power. So how did that play out in your, how did you encounter female power within your studies of anthropology?
Well, in the 1970s, women started writing books that were challenging the all-male bias in anthropology. One of them was A Woman the Gatherer, and she demonstrated that women collected most of the food in the ethnographic groups that have been studied. So it wasn't that men hunted and provided all the food. Women provided most of it, and that was a revelation. There was another one that baboon troops really are dominated by female hierarchies, and these ferocious looking males live outside the tribe. And the females choose who they mate with. So these new stories of female agency started coming out in the 70s. And then finally, Maria Gimbutas started publishing her books about the goddess civilization, and they were astounding books, completely reinterpreting the entire prehistoric period. So now I want to go into the deep past, and my neighbor Ted is going to take us there. He's a physicist, so he knows how to bend time, and he also gave me the title for my book, Dance of the Deities. So Ted, take us away.
Will do, Pat. Okay, folks, you are about to see something quite extraordinary, the inside of a wormhole that leads to our own past. Lucian, can we get the next, yes. So we are going to Bulgaria and Romania to see what kinds of objects these people left behind, dating from 3000 to 6000 BC during the Neolithic Age.
Here we go, folks.
Here we go. Our first trip into the past.
I hope everyone's wearing their seatbelts. Whoa.
So I think we're just about there. If we could go ahead and land. Awesome.
It's mute.
All right, here we are on the Black Sea in Bulgaria, 5000 BC. And behind us is Old Europe, which Gimbutas described in her books, extended from Greece through Eastern Europe and other places, but mostly that. And thousands of artifacts showing female features, sexual features, have been dug up out of this ground around here. And in the prehistoric period, they have been called Venus figures for years and years in anthropology, or fertility figures. She named them goddesses, and she described a civilization that was peaceful and egalitarian. It was an astounding thing that she did, and she turned anthropology and archaeology on its head for quite a while until people started to discredit her. And so then let's go on to the next one, Lucian. This is the map of Eastern Europe. You can see Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Moldavia, parts of Ukraine, and just over the isthmus, the Bosphorus, is Turkey, which is the site of the oldest towns in the world. But we're located right there on the Black Sea where that red arrow is. That's where the beach is. And so all of that area was involved in the Neolithic of Europe with these peaceful farmers that probably came from Turkey into Europe by sea and by land, bringing egalitarian culture with them, the early egalitarian culture. So now you see what kinds of artifacts in the next slide have been dug out of the earth. This is a figure from Bulgaria with snake legs, breasts, and a kind of phallic-like head, very much like the next one, which is also, breasts and big hips and a phallic-like head. And then the next one is similar. They're all fairly similar, yeah. Here is a bird goddess. She called it a bird goddess. It has a headdress and a long neck and breasts. These are rather representative of the kinds of artifacts that have been hanging around in museum drawers for many, many years. And she brought them all together in this grand theory of Old Europe and the civilization of the goddess. They're very integrated figures. So they're not women, they're nature creatrix. They're a combination of nature and female and male. So it's an interesting and very, I think, wonderful image for us to have. But this whole thing was taken apart, and I'll get back to this later, by archaeologists in the last 20 years. So now we want to, go to the steppe warrior. Okay, we'll finish up here. Yeah, these are slim nudes that they're dug out of the Cyclades in the same era, and they probably came from graves. So the goddess was representing in life as well as in death. And she always talked about regeneration. And then about 4500 BC, this area of Old Europe was invaded by warriors from the steppes. So the next one you see, this is from a museum in St. Petersburg of a Eurasian steppe warrior, prehistoric. The horse was domesticated about 4000 BC. And these warriors just rode out of the Ukraine area and they just invaded all these towns and changed the culture, set the foundation for modern culture in Greece, the classical culture in Greece. And the rest of us, they represented the Indo-European culture that came from the steppes. And it's not often said, but these were probably warriors that established the Indo-European culture. Yeah. And so,
yeah, I'm curious, like how did you come to understand this kind of shift, right? From a, kind of female or egalitarian ruling to this kind of more of a male dominance in these years?
Yeah. So this was one cause of male dominance. And these people provided the men provided most of the food in a pastoral society. So they were dominant. If women don't control the resources, they tend to be subjected to male dominance. And so this was a natural male dominant culture. There are others that sprang up as a result of trauma in the society due to invasion or environmental stress. And over time, they became warrior oriented and male dominated. So this is a common thing that happens in cultures that are under a great deal of stress. They become male dominant, which worries me about ours. They have certain rituals to enculturate men into this toxic masculinity that makes them sacrifice their lives for the society. They have horrible, brutalizing rituals that were known 100 years ago, written about 100 years ago, but kind of lost in the literature. But you can see in the next video of what kind of, hold on now, don't turn it on yet. What kind of, go forward, Lucian. Yeah, okay, but just hold it here for a sec. This will give you an idea of how awful these rituals are. They're very brutalizing, and they are done to make young men insensitive to pain and to drive out the feminine ethos in them. They're humiliated as women if they cry out or make any. So they're supposed to be stoic in the face of pain. This is toxic masculinity in its tribal form. These people are from Brazil, the Maui. Okay, show us this video.
Stick their hands into gloves swarming with these nasty creatures. Among the Satere Moe tribe of Brazil, it's how boys become men. And for these young initiates, the painful moment is at hand. The ants have been gathered from the forest, then drugged, then placed stinger first into woven glove liners. Now, as the ants writhe in angry desperation, the ravaging begins. One by one, the young men suffer the shock of having dozens of stingers penetrate their flesh. They must wear the gloves for 10 minutes. Their agony is unmistakable.
The pain is incomparable, understand? There's no pain like it.
Have you ever had your hands on fire? It's the same thing.
And this moment's not over. Once the gloves are off, the stinging and burning only grow more excruciating. As the venom turns their hands into swollen, simmering, paralyzed stumps. What's worse, No initiate can be considered a true warrior until he has undergone this rite of pain, not once, but 20 times.
Okay, that's it. Yeah,
Meet the
okay. Yeah, so let's just stay here for a minute, Lucian. And now want to go back. We want to leave old Europe, and although this occurred in the present, not the present, but the modern time. But we're going to leave old Europe and go back even further in time to a place called Çatalhöyük, which is one of the oldest towns in the world in Turkey. So Ted, are you ready with your time machine?
I am. Folks, it's time for our second jump through space and time. Go ahead and start the engines, Lucian. We are traveling to one of the oldest towns in the history of humankind, Çatalhöyük. And we have just about arrived. You could pull us out of the wormhole, Lucian.
Yeah, so here we've landed in a place called Çatalhöyük, which is 9,000 years ago. And it was a place of incredible complexity and size for its time. One of the during the Neolithic era, there were about 4,000 people who lived here over 2,000 years. And from all evidence, it was egalitarian. The farmers from this area probably ended up in old Europe, some of them anyway.
So yeah, it seems like we're creeping back in time, and so you kind of have showed us some of the goddess figures. But so when was your first encounter of these kind of the what we see as the prehistoric goddess before
Yeah.
the modern realm?
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, thanks for that question. It was this place was first excavated in the 60s by an archaeologist named Mellart. And he described these goddess figures on the walls of these homes. And they were relief carvings that had lost the face and the hands and the feet, because every time the people recreated them, they plastered them over, but they left the body size. And this is the interior of one of the places. They're bulls' heads, and they had these figures, relief figures on the wall. And show us the next one, Lucian. So this is what was found on the wall, and Mellart described this as a goddess. It has a circle around the navel, you can see, which would indicate something about birth, I would guess. And I was in an audience in the 70s when Anne Barstow, a religious historian, said that she described what this was like and said she'd never seen anything like it for the female aspect of culture, that there was nothing demonic about it. It was beautiful. And I was just stunned, as were everybody else in that very full room, standing room only. We were just shocked to see a prehistoric goddess described. Never heard of it before. And so when we walked out of that room, several of us started talking about how maybe women had invented agriculture. You can show the next slide. So this is another version of the same figure. Mellart was involved in a scandal, and he was thrown out of Turkey for a while. And this place lay untouched for 20 years until it was taken over by a Stanford team of archaeologists. And they have excavated in the last 20 years. And they reversed everything that Mellart called a goddess. Everything. It's just amazing how they have demolished Gimbutas and then Çatalhöyük. Okay, next one. So the Stanford people said that this was not a goddess figure at all, it was a bear figure. So they found this figure in the dust in the ruins of Çatalhöyük, and it said that, well, that means because of the position of the legs and arms, that means that that figure on the wall was a bear, not a female. Well, possibly, who knows? But it's a common enough position in that time, and since then, for this kind of image, the arms and legs up like that, that's not always a bear image, it's something else. So, but they called them bears, so there were no goddesses on the walls in Çatalhöyük. Next one. Then Malark called this the goddess of Çatalhöyük, seated goddess of Çatalhöyük. Her hands are on lions, and it was renamed by the Stanford people. And then you see in the next slide, they called it. No, I'm sorry. The last slide, they called it the seated woman of Çatalhöyük. Yeah, okay, go on, Lucian. And now this one was pulled out of the ground only 3 years ago, and the news reports called it a goddess, but the Stanford people said, well, it's just an elder woman. And then the head of the excavation, Ian Hodder, said that, well, it actually looked like a sumo wrestler to him because they have breasts like this. And so I looked up images of sumo wrestlers and I thought, yeah, they do have breasts like that. Hodder said, well, there's no genitals on this figure, so we don't know if it's male or female. And then in the next slide, I said, well, sumo wrestlers don't have butts like this.
Right? At least none I've seen. I don't know.
These what?
I guess I don't watch a lot of sumo wrestling. But...
Oh, they don't. I looked them up. They don't have butts.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wow.
So that's how the goddess has been eliminated from the Neolithic by archaeologists in the last 20 years.
It seems, yeah, it's a very full kind of view of where the goddess has gone, where goddess to animal. So, I mean, Pat, what shocked you most about kind of the research as you're doing all this?
Well, I've been pretty shocked at the extent to which this has been reinterpreted out of existence. Archaeologists, anthropologists meet and they hoot and holler if you mention Gimbutas's name. They call this goddess a deity. They call her a deity, and sexist at meetings. They call this idea of a goddess as sexist. Well, I mean, we have all male gods. Is that not sexist? I don't know. Seems to me it is. There's not even any teaching of Gimbutas's theories in the academic world anymore. And so that's another reason why I wrote this book. We need to see the patriarchal bias in our story of humankind. Mm. And so Ted, we're going to go to the oldest now. Take us away again for another 4,000 years into the past.
So here we go again, folks. Let's jump into the wormhole. Lucian, could you start the engines? So we are now going to one of the oldest constructions we know of, a religious site of great mystery, built some 12,000 years ago. And we are just about there. Could you take us out of the wormhole, Lucian?
So this is Gobkeli Tepe, an absolutely astounding and mysterious installation, the oldest surviving construction in the world, over several thousand years, but this is probably around 12,000 years ago. And it was uncovered in the 90s by a German archaeologist who found these monoliths. So they're 16 to 20 feet tall. They weigh like many, many tons. They were lugged out of the nearby limestone mountains by hunters and gatherers, not even settled people yet. Nobody knows what it means. And their interpretations are all over the place. But show us the next slide, Lucian. Here is one of the most beautiful pictures. The monoliths are carved, some of them are carved with human hands down the side, human arms, and a loincloth across the middle, which indicates that they were male. This is these are beautiful carvings. It's just amazing carvings. All the rest of the carvings are of animals. But this indicates, back up once more. Yeah, this indicates a kind of a supernatural or extraordinarily large image of a male. And the masculinity of the site was overwhelming. When I discovered it, it was so shocking to me, I could hardly deal with it. There was no evidence of a female there, or very little. And, but just these great monoliths with male hands. And so people interpreted them in that way. It was all penises, all phalluses, all male. Go on to the next one. And they were covered with these carvings of animals, the natural world. You can see in the next one, really very beautiful stuff, birds and scorpions and ducks, all kinds of beautiful carving. There was even a bear stamp on that, on one of them. So interpretations, especially by, well, starting with Klaus Schmidt, was that it was a temple and a sanctuary for the cult of the dead. Okay, the dead of hunters. Next one. Here's a predatory animal. There were a lot of predatory animals there. They were the ones that had the phalluses. The humans did not. Human figures did not. So all the phalluses, all the penises were for animals. But still, it seemed to be all male, except for the last figure. Go on. Here you see a close-up. And here is the only figure of a female, and it was scratched onto one of the stone benches years after, apparently. And the excavators say that it was actually graffiti. If it was graffiti, it was probably the first graffiti in the world, but it's probably not graffiti because it was scratched onto a bench. And I'm going to explain what I mean by this. So this has been described as hardly a goddess, somebody said, you know, okay. But the genitals were very often revealed in prehistoric goddess figures. So it's not unusual to have this kind of a position. And the way I dealt with this, I finally found a huge book on matriarchal society written by a German philosopher named Heidi Gertner Abendroth. And she brought together all the ethnographies around the world that had to do with matriarchal societies. And there were a lot of them, past and present. And one of them, go on to the next slide. Next slide. This is from, no, back up. The Kazi people in Northeast India. And these people have been around since the Neolithic. They still exist, and they still construct these monoliths, these megaliths. So they have described what they mean by them. And the flat stone it's called a dolmens, and it represents the female. The tall stones are called menhirs, and they represent men. So these are ancestors. It's ancestor worship. The standing stones are male protectors, and the flat stones are the feasts, the food brought by the women, by the ancestral clan mother. And they are matrilineal, matriarchal societies that have created these around the world. And she makes that claim. And when I learned that, I thought, thank God, I finally understand what Gobkeli Tepe means. It's not a masculine place. It's just composed of dolmens and menhirs, both men and women together. And the same is probably true of Stonehenge. The next, show me the next. Yeah, Stonehenge. There's a dolmen on the top, and the menhirs are standing. And this is also backed up by the next one, which shows the Tala of Menorca, as an island off of the coast of Spain, off the coast of Catalan. And Tala means table. It's the top. It's a dolmen, and it's a table, just like the flat stones in Gobkeli Tepe would be tables, feasting tables, and they did feast there. So it makes a lot of sense that the flat stones represent the female, the standing stones represent the male. And these were built like 1000 BC, so they followed Gobkeli Tepe by 10,000, 9,000 years. But nevertheless, these megaliths are found throughout Europe and the Mediterranean. So I felt finally confident that I had come to understand the meaning of Gobkeli Tepe, and it is not a male-biased description. There's ancestor worship of both men and women. And so more recently, even we have seen Gimbutas's theories of the steppe invasion validated by genetics, genetic studies of Germans and Eastern Europeans has shown that an army did arrive from the steppes in the prehistoric period several times, and their genes are spread throughout Europe. They were the Mycenaeans in Greece that established the classical civilization there and overtook the Minoans in Crete. And so they're called the Yamnaya people. Their genes are spread everywhere through Europe, and they became our modern patriarchy. So that's the trip. And I think it's time, Ted, to take us back to the present. This is another Tola. And then finally, this is another Tola in Menorca. Ted, we're going to land not exactly in the present, but the mid-century of the last century. Okay, take us.
Okay, it's time for our last jaunt of the day, returning to our own century. This is your last chance to see the inside of a wormhole. Go ahead and get us going, Lucian. And I think that's just far enough if you could pull us out. Can you pull us out of the wormhole, Lucian?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we land on a mushroom cloud, not like the one I took in the beginning. This is an atomic test in the Pacific Islands in the mid-century. And it was, we all grew up with that, those of us who are my age. And we knew that war was over. We could not do it anymore because it would damage, not just damage, destroy the earth. We couldn't do it. It was over. It was over. We had to do something else. Even though we had Vietnam then, we didn't fight Russia. We didn't fight anybody with a nuclear weapon. And it was in 1973 that finally the draft for all men, all American men, was ended. And then men did not have to be brutalized into toxic masculinity anymore. They could learn to be what they are as human beings. And that is, next slide, that is as parents. And it was just wonderful to see in the succeeding years, to see men hiking with little babies on their backs, holding their children, training their children. This does not happen in a male-dominant culture. Men do not participate in the rearing of children. But in our society, they did. And it has allowed men to become more themselves. And also at the same time, what has happened has been, the next slide, the emergence of women leaders. And we've seen this grow slowly, gradually, to quite a, now having a majority of women in the House of Representatives, majority of Democrats anyway. And so these two things, freedom of men to be who they are, to grow up without prescriptions for masculinity, and the freedom of women to take authority and power in the political sphere. These two things are crucial to an egalitarian society, and we all know that. It's why the Trump presidency has been so troubling, to me anyway. The next slide, you see another element of, I think, peacefulness is the creation of new communities where people live together, know each other, learn to govern together, learn how to live together. Although conflict does occur, we have tried to develop ways to deal with it. This is our co-housing community in the very beginning, and they're really becoming quite popular. More and more are being created. It was a place that I went for the rest of my life. I wanted to live in a neighborhood where I knew people, and it's been an amazing experience. I mean, look at the help I've got just in launching this book. Next slide. This is early days in Pleasant Hill Co-housing. It's multi-generational, so we have children around. Those of us who don't have children enjoy that. And next slide. And we hike together. And we, in the next slide, eat together, which is critical in a community, a village. And it was critical in Çatalhöyük 9,000 years ago. Eating groups were the basis of social organization in that town. And it's the basis of our social organization as well. So, and finally, let's go on to the last one. This is an image of Adana and Dumuzi, gods and goddesses of Mesopotamia. They're very sexual, these images of Inanna. She worshipped her genitals and spoke about them, wrote poetry about them. At least she didn't, she was an image, but the author, Enheduanna, did. She was the priestess who wrote about Inanna. And so the recovering the woman's body free from exploitation, taking pride in the woman's body, having pride in our reproductive capacities, having pride in our genitals. This has been very important. I mean, I grew up thinking that they were dirty, so I had to hide them. This is typical of a male-dominant culture. The woman is hidden away. So we need to have a return of reverence for our bodies, as well as some notion of them being sacred, along with the earth. Next slide.
Yes, that. Beautiful. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you've kind of unpacked a lot in this book.
Yeah.
You kind of ripped things open for us to look at and the world to look at. And I'm curious, after, kind of sharing your story, your personal story as a memoir, and also, kind of unpacking, just, egalitarian society and male dominance, like what brought you peace in this kind of search that this journey that you went on?
Oh, thanks, Maggie. Yes, well, it's the natural world that brings me peace. It's nature. It's the beauty of the earth. It's not, I don't believe in goddesses or gods, but I do think there is some sort of spirit around that I don't even want to define it. I don't even want to talk about it, but I can feel it. It's, you're going to see in the next slide, you're going to see coral releasing a blizzard of sex hormones. Don't start it yet. Yeah, okay, this is good. Stay here. And this happens at every full moon. You have a blizzard of these sex hormones and eggs that float to the surface, and they unite on the surface, and they move off to create new coral elsewhere. It's an amazing, people who've been there and swum through it said it's like going through a blizzard. This is the natural world. It's beyond mystery and magic. It's just something beyond us. We can't comprehend it. We can only have reverence for it, appreciate it. So that we could watch this video for a short period of time, and then we'll move on to a video that shows has put music to what I like to think of as the heartbeat of the earth. And it hopefully will settle us into a more reverent state. So start. Playing.
Bravo, bravo.
Yeah. Stop screen sharing, Lucian. Stop
Yeah.
screen. Yeah. Don't screen. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Now I can see everybody.
And so that brings us to our country. And how could we have done such a thing? What's the I guess my question is, what is the attraction, do you think, for some women who are very bright, very intelligent, to men like Trump? I'm thinking of like a Kellyanne Conway, who's obviously extremely bright,
Yeah.
well-educated, and it's not conservatism, because Trump is hardly, he just takes on whatever he wants. So do you have any kind of a psychological explanation for that?
No, yes, I do. I do. But don't forget we have the Electoral College, which dates from the days of slavery. So we're still dealing with an awful system in some ways. But yeah, patriarchy, and growing up in a male-dominant culture, you just take it for granted that men are supposed to be the leaders and have the power. And all of us are affected. I'm affected. I mean, it's taken me a lifetime to even come close to the idea of a female deity. So, we all expect that because we grew up with the Bible or something like it. And we have these feelings that, women are just, they don't have the charisma. They don't have the power. They don't have the authority to lead the nation. And I do believe that it was misogyny that brought us Trump.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, educated women had a different profile of voting than uneducated women or lower educated women. So it has something to do with education, but we're all affected by this idea.
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful that things are going to continue to evolve.
I hope so.
And thinking Kamala in 4 more years.
I worry. I worry. Yeah. I don't want more misogynist responses. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. We have one more hand up, so we'll take one more question before we go. It looks like it's from Laura and Jim. You all have a question?
Yes.
Laura.
Hi, Pat. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
Love the presentation and very excited to read your book.
Oh, good.
Yeah, really excited, and thank you for this, and thank you for all the fun slides and the video and the time travel. That was really fun. I've never done that before in that way. I guess my question is related to Joanne's about finding hope.
Yeah.
You know, in the middle of what feels like so much misogyny, and you could take one step forward and say, wow, it is possible to have a culture that honors the feminine, and seeing those female figurines as what they really honored, you know, putting, you know, the goddesses, and then saying, no, those are just animals, it's kind of a big deal. And so, and I think my question is about the memoir aspect of this. And of course, I'll get this when I read the book, but I'm just, since I know you and since I was sitting with you at the beginning when you were just starting to write, and there was all this incredible frustration at the male domination of archaeology and the male domination of the media that you had worked in, and all this academia. What, in my experience, even writing a memoir, even just a short little bit, you have to come to some piece of peace about it. So I'm curious, what new insights did you come to through writing about this history and integrating your memoir with it? Like what new insights did you gain about yourself that might help the rest of us?
You know, thank you for that question, Laura, because it really brings up something I forgot to say, and I think it was very important. There was a point there where I kept trying to think about what would the world be like if women ran it, and I didn't like the question. I couldn't answer it. And finally, I realized we're not going to run the world. We don't want to run the world. We want to be equal. We want men to run it too. And the answer lies in the changes that men are going through now. As men are released from this toxic masculine ethos that they've had to cope with, they're individuals, they become parents, they become friends, they save their humanity. They are the first victims of patriarchy. And so and they are becoming free. They are becoming free. And I think that is where my hope lies. Because I think, you know, we women went through a lot of changes in the last 50 years. We've been waiting for it to happen with men, and I think it is.